It is Tuesday, so that means we have another tier list here at MLB The Show 22. We're going to go through every single diamond card in the game, position by position, and recommend which cards you should be using on your team and going for, and the ones that you may want to pass on when trying to build your team the right way in Diamond Dynasty. Obviously, there are a lot of diamonds, a lot of cards to go through, so I lumped them all into a big tier list here and go through my favorite options that I've given a try. We are now about at the end of the future of the franchise program. The future star cards are very solid, but obviously we're going to start to get better cards as we do in each month or so in the game. So we have the new big program inbound with 5 new bosses. This is before that has been dropped, so we'll give one final wrap-up of the future star cards and some of the headliners and such that we missed in between the last tier list we did. Well, check that out. Check that video out up here, by the way. So yeah, let's hop on into the tier list and let's go through which cards that you should be using at each position. So here is the catcher's tier list, and I want to review the tiers one more time here while we are sitting here looking at this one. Your F tier is basically the cards you want to avoid. Your D tier are basically your maybe very beginning cards if you really like them. Your C tier are the maybe plausible beginner cards. Your B tier are your best beginner budget cards for when you're first just hopping on and getting the game. Your A tier is honestly a step above that, but they're solid, viable options if you happen to be really good with them. But your S tier are really the options I suggest using this point in the game. The only difference between S plus and S is that S plus is who I personally use, where I would be personally picking if I could. But my pick in the S plus tier is Joe Mauer. Does not mean they're significantly better or worse than the other S tier. Just my personal picks of the bunch, just so you know my personal opinions on which cards I like the most. And Joe Mauer is still the catcher for me. Just the hitting is incredible, the defense is nice, and even though you do face a fair amount of lefties in ranked seasons, I think his bat's good enough. He can hit lefty more than fine. And I don't know, I just found the most success with his higher contact in comparison to other catchers, which either are well-rounded and are slightly weaker in some avenues than Joe Mauer, or they don't bring enough to the table. However, I like Henry Davis, and I've heard great things on Joey Bart throughout this last month as people have actually gotten to use the future star cards. And this is the same tier list, but with secondaries. So I include a bunch of cards, including secondary positions, if you want your options. And Kyle Farmer actually is an incredible A tier card for a tops now. If you're just getting the game, do those tops now moments and get a hold of him. He's actually a very nasty catcher option. Preiner, the player who ended up winning the Summer Circuit Grand Finals, rocked Kyle Farmer in that tournament on Legend difficulty and mashed with them. So, looking for a good budget catcher, consider him, Taylor Ward, or Dalton Varsho if you're just starting the game. And also, if you're looking for a top tier catcher, maybe consider Jimmy Fox. The higher contact really should play on those higher difficulties. These two would be my personal picks on a World Series push or something of that sort. They're actually pretty similar type players, just Jimmy Fox is a righty in with worse defense. Now we move over to first base. And first base, if you've been playing this game, you know it's a very stacked position. A lot of really good options. And I think Frank Thomas is still that guy. If you have him, I think he is the best option. The beauty of first base is if you don't have Frank or you don't like Frank, there are a lot of really good options in between. Delgado's great. Taglia I've used a good bit and have really enjoyed him. He's nasty. Jimmy Fox now as well is another top tier option if you want to slide him over at first. Nick Pratto as well, nice first base option. Just Jared Walsh. Don't sleep on Jared Walsh because he also gets a couple quirks, being a tops now card. So you know he's a 95 overall, might play above that a little bit since he gets a couple active quirks since it is a current year tops now card. So guys like him and Alonso get some quirks that might boost them up a little bit. If you're starting off the game and you don't have many cards, again, do your tops now moments. Get yourself Jared Walsh, man. Card's actually really nasty. And now when we include secondaries at first base, the position becomes a lot more deep. You could slide Devers over. You could play Pujols there, and he's still going to be a great option still. You could slide George Brett over there if you need be. You could also play Babe Ruth there. I would definitely be picking Frank, Babe, or if you do want to play Brett at first. I wouldn't really be doing that unless you have another third baseman you really like. But I would probably just use Babe or Frank at first. They're going to be the best and the best as first base options. And you see some of the catchers and some outfielders are included in this A tier. I think there are so many good hitters at first base. I got to have them separated from the rest of the bunch because are S tier are just such elite hitters. I think they're significantly better than some of these guys down here. Now we check over to second base, and we have ourselves a newcomer, Mr. JAVIER BAEZ. I don't know what his position's gonna actually be. As of right now, he's a primary second baseman. He won his Silver Slugger at second base, but for some reason on the card art it says shortstop. So I assume he will stay a second baseman. He is definitely the pick. He's very well rounded with his hitting attributes and defense. The only downside of JAVIER BAEZ is slightly lower vision, which won't affect many people. I mean, there's a reason like live series Mike Trout is still good with his 50-something vision. So you can use JAVIER BAEZ if you want to. I do like vision as an attribute, so on legend difficulty, I may struggle with him a little bit, but that's just a very minor part of the game that people don't really care that much about. Foscue is a favorite of the bunch, and Chase Utley is still elite. Vidal Brujan, new headliner over the span of the previous tier list, and I've heard nothing but good things about him. Really versatile positionally, and switch hitting is always a good thing to have. And then Jose Altuve, I will still say this mashes, but as you see with second base, it is very much a not stacked position. So you probably want to slide someone as secondary there if you don't have options. So we see our secondaries. You get a whole lot of other players when you include the shortstops at their secondaries. Of someone like Ketel Marte or Mookie Betts, or now Alfonso Soriano, you could slide at second. And you're going to see this guy a ton, but Eduardo Escobar. You're going to want to really consider Eduardo Escobar at nearly every position he can play. The switch hitting is great, especially if you're looking for a third baseman or a second baseman. Those are positions that are really valuable for a card like this. And if you're someone who liked Jose Ramirez and maybe have been hesitant running him, definitely try Eduardo Escobar. Switch hitting, great hitting attributes, great contact and power. He's a stud, so I've actually been rocking him at second base right now. Now we're going to bounce over to our primary shortstops. And now that I've gotten to try a bunch of the Future Star cards, I have a better bit of feel on which cards I like the most. I still do enjoy Oswald Peraza. I think he's the most well-rounded of the shortstops. Personally, my favorite. But Bryson Stott, I have used a little bit and I've heard has been incredible. These are the big two for shortstops in my opinion. Is that Gunnar Henderson, for example, a little weaker versus lefties. Khalil Watson is well-rounded, but a little weaker overall than Peraza and Stott. Brady House is a little bit slow for a shortstop. Peguero is better versus left, not so versus right. And Wynn lacks power. So these two I've heard have been the big two picks for the shortstop. So I would pick them if you're looking for a good shortstop option. I do want to try that Carlos Correa. I think he could be nasty with the contact and power mix he has. Also, he's always got a good swing. And you definitely can consider Jorge Polanco. Just keep in mind the risk of his defense. His defense might be a little bit of a struggle, but if you're looking for a good starter option, he's definitely a super legit shortstop pick. And now that we include secondaries, JAVIER BAEZ would definitely still be an S-tier shortstop option. However, he'd be downgraded to gold defense there. Like second base, you have a lot more options. You could slide Austin Martin there. Looking for a future star, you could play Foscue there. You could play Eduardo or Ketel Marte looking for the switch hitter options. There's so many better options once you include secondaries. A lot of really good options. I would recommend, honestly, one of these top three in the S+. But also go for a switch hitter maybe, like Ketel or Eduardo Escobar at this point in the game. I think those would be your best options if you're not someone who's rocking a creative player out there. And even though I have players like Troy Gloss and Mike Schmidt in the A tier, you really don't want to rock those players at short unless you literally have to. Now we go over to third base, and since last time we did a tier list, Evan Longoria came out, and he's definitely the go-to righty third baseman right now. Very well-rounded hitting attributes, solid defense. It's just that right now we have so many players. I don't think many people want to use Evan Longoria at third. You may like Rafael Devers, that card's nasty. Obviously, George Brett exists. Also, Brett Beatty exists. I think if you're looking for a good, easy to acquire option, go for Devers or Beatty at third. Also, again, Eduardo Escobar is a top tier option. I just think he's most valuable at second base, for example, where you could really use the good hitting. Right now at third base, there are a lot of solid options, especially when you start to include secondaries. And obviously, a fair amount of people might have George Brett. So it is very difficult to find a good third baseman to play up the part of George Brett right now. And as you see, even with the secondaries, not much changes here. If you want to slide a shortstop or second baseman over, you definitely can. Just again, guys like Beatty, Brett, Longo, and Devers are going to be your best of the best options. You could definitely play Foscue there. Probably better off there than shortstop, ideally, if you're not going to play him at second. So a lot of good options if you include the secondaries at third base, which is nice to see. But again, this position should likely get more deep with really good options as the year goes on. Now we go to the outfield, and we're just going to do half and half here because there's so many cards. This is your lower half of the tier list up to the B tier. Your B tier probably no more than bench bats for a majority of people because you're not going to play bad defense out in your outfield with the type of platoon hitting attributes these guys bring. Definitely don't use your F tier if you're just starting the game. They just aren't going to really get the job done. I'm sorry, not sorry. Honestly, Yordan Alvarez could use a little bit of a bump up since he is now a 90+ diamond, but still. You see, we probably have some shuffling to do with our live series cards because Juan Soto's not even a diamond anymore. Mookie Betts is actually better now. It's very weird how the live series cards have shuffled. But really, this is what people care about, the A, S, and S+ tier. My picks right now, definitely Castellanos is a really good card. He's been incredible for me. He's in the last few weeks. He's genuinely been one of my favorite hitters in the game right now. Babe Ruth has been solid, but could be better. I'm starting to get over using Trout and Clemente because I've been using them for a while. And I don't know, Trout's vision, I strike out a fair bit with them, so I haven't had as much fun with them. So I really do want to try someone like Vlad Sr., George Springer, or Soriano in the outfield here soon. I've been really looking for a center fielder, and as you see in this bunch, center field options are pretty slim, funny enough. Like, you can play Clemente in the secondary, you can play Trout there, you can play Soriano in the secondary, and George Springer. But it feels like that's like really it for the really, really good center field options. Other than that, it's just like you got some solid guys, like you could play someone like Pete Crow Armstrong, who I think is one of my favorite future star cards out there. You can play Ketel Marte out there. You can play Mookie in the secondary. Like, there's solid options, but I think right now we're missing that really good center fielder like the Willie Mays, Mickey Mantle, Ken Griffey Jr. type at this point in the game that has like well-rounded hitting, speed, and fielding. So we'll probably see some of that soon. Other than that, your corner outfield has a lot of options, and especially if you're just getting going through that future star program, you can really get away with running any of the future star players in your outfield. I think they are good. Just prioritize these 4 over here instead of these 4 in the bottom. These guys lack a little on the hitting side of things or lack a little bit on the contact like Yoelki. They're good cards. You get away with using all of them. Just these 4 like Valera, Martin, Pete, and Hendrick, I would definitely prioritize over your future stars, outfielders. And of course, when you include the secondaries, the S and S+ tier changes up at least a little bit. You can play Brett Beatty in left field. Again, the corner outfield become a bigger option. Carlos Delgado as well. You could slide in the corner. Toglia, Prado, Eduardo Escobar making another appearance. When you include secondaries, you could slide someone else in the corner outfield. Actually have a good viable use out of them. And just keep in mind, again, there's so many corner outfield options. It's going to be tough to find the right player to be in that spot for you. Just try whatever players you hit the best with and put them in a corner outfield. You're probably more than fine. Pitching is tough because pitching comes down to user control and how you play with pitchers of certain pitch types. So like just looking at the list, the bottom half, there isn't much change other than, you know, your top snow pitchers. They are objectively worse, a majority of them, than the rest of the pitchers in the game. It's because they're usually lacking some sort of attribute or significantly in the pitch mix. So guys like Strider, Mikolas, a little bit weak on the pitches. And also, by the way, you see Christy Mathewson here. Never use this card ever. I beg you. Never use Christy Mathewson. Unless you're playing someone that swings at every pitch outside the strike zone. That card is nearly impossible to pitch well with, is what I learned. But now we go to our A, S, and S+ tier. There's not that much change here. Honestly, Yuri Perez could be a little better, but I really can't name that many pitchers actually better than him. So I think he's definitely used in a rotation if you have him. Bobby Miller, I think, is still good for ranked. Obviously, Randy is dominant. Roy Halladay is still great. I've had a lot of fun using Tom Glavine. So this is my personal 5 rotation in the S+. However, you know, if I was using my best, I could throw Keuchel and Price in there. If I had Bob Feller, I'd try him as well. Greg Maddux, I have some fun with, and I think this Kershaw is a little underrated for the lefty. Our A tier, a lot of future star cards, including Walston, Detmers, Brash. Like, these cards are fine. You could definitely use them in your rotation if need be, but they're a little bit more difficult to pitch with. I would say if I'm going to pick one or two, go for Detmers and Brash. Maybe you want to go for Job, but other than that, I mean, these pitchers are no more than just rotation stuffers, just someone to get you 5 solid pitchers. Wouldn't be using them that much. And a couple top sound guys slide in, like Edward Cabrera, Jameson Taillon, who actually have pretty solid pitch mixes for top sound cards. If you're looking for a beginning starter, check them out. And yeah, as you see, the lefty dominant meta is definitely starting to see a shift. We had Randy, Price, and Keuchel and Glavine being really, really good lefties for a good while, but that's starting to shift as the year's going on. With guys like Miller, Halladay, now Yuri Perez, Bob Feller now. People are going to start to get a hold of Greg Maddux. The rotation is going to start to shift to be a little bit more righty favored, I think. The value in having a righty stacked lineup is becoming less and less, because now the rotation is starting to get more balanced. Now we're going to our bullpen, our relievers. And after having some time with the cards and learning how the cards play, I think that, honestly, I don't even know if I could put Kenley in the S+ tier anymore. Put him right in the S. But I think Zach Britton is my go-to lefty, and then Goose Gossage right now might be my go-to righty. His control isn't great. However, the velocity plays, the slurve is always good, and this card is always a big favorite for a righty. And Britton's definitely been my best lefty so far, funny enough. Josh Hader a close number 2. But past that, Brian Wilson's definitely a good reliever to have in your pen. Kenley's still good to use. Yohan Duran is great on Legend difficulty, and sometimes on Hall of Fame. New Eric Gagne, I actually have found some success with, even though I normally suck with his cards. If I were to pick like the go-to relievers, I would pick a fair bit of the S tier, and you will likely need to use a couple of the A tier relievers to fill out your bullpen. Like right now, I have Chapman. You could also use Hoffman. Honestly, Hoffman is right on the border of A and S. I probably could put him S, but just lacks a little bit in the velocity front. As you see with the relievers, a little bit of a different game than the rotation. At this point, with relievers, pick 3 lefties, give or take. Bunch of solid righties, but yet guys like Devin Williams are still really good uses. So basically just go out there, experiment with everyone in the A and S tier. I have a tough time putting someone like Bruce Sutter in the A tier, but we'll leave him there because there is still a little bit of a lack of depth in the bullpen, as there always is. We gotta start seeing more and more and more relievers coming out. And last, but definitely not least, are bench bats. These are some of your favorite bench bats in the game. You're gonna be stockpiling players on the bench. This first 5 would be the ones that I would be using. Jock, Devers, or Delgado are great lefty bats. Nelly Cruz is great as a righty. If you have all the stuff in the world, you could use Castellanos on the bench as well. Some underrated pinch hitter bats, guys like Larry Walker, Luis Gonzalez, Giancarlo Stanton, and you could even use Jorge Polanco if you're looking for a switch hitter type. These are just players that I think are best off on the bench instead of your starting lineups, or players that are likely to hit the benches because of how deep teams are at this point. So I think as we start to see these players and teams start to get acquired more, these will be the players you see hit the bench more often than not. But again, if you're looking for bench bats, look for players that are good versus one side at least, like Jock Peterson, who's really good versus righties. Because when you are going to use players as pinch hitters, anticipate using them versus right-handed pitchers with a lefty, or left-handed pitchers with a righty. And my final future star tier list. I know we talked about this last time, but actually getting to use these cards for the span of the month, I've started to experience which cards I like the most, which ones I really don't like. After using basically all 30 of them a fair bit, I would say that our S tier, definitely Bobby Miller, Taglia, Foscue, Beatty, Peraza, and Stott. These players play valuable positions. Some of them have good versatility where you can move them around a bit. And, you know, they're definitely the best of the best, the cream of the crop. Your A tier, honestly, I would love to put Valera in the S tier. It's just that not many people need a corner outfielder, it feels like. However, guys like P. Crow Armstrong have exceeded my expectations. Same with Valera, Nick Prado as well. And his Austin Hendrick is also really nice. And obviously, all your catchers are in the A tier. The thing that is with the catchers, they're all good, but none of them are incredible from my experience. So just find one that you may do the best with if you don't have Joe Mauer, and put them in your lineup. B tier, you can definitely use if you do well with them. C tier are definitely the ones that you probably want to avoid when first choosing them or looking for the good options to buy. And your D tier is definitely the probably no touchy just because they're very difficult to use and find success with. But again, if you like the team, if you like the player, whatever it is, you could definitely use them and probably do all right with them. And that is the tier list for today. I know there are a lot of cards, however, not too many new cards since the last time we talked about the tier list. I want to do this because, again, it is Tuesday, and we have a bunch of new cards coming out this next week on the 30th. So make sure you are subbed to the channel. I will review the 5 or whatever bosses we get on the 30th and give you guys my thoughts on which ones you should be taking, trying first, and all that. If you want to see some more in-depth deep dives on cards, check out the other videos I upload on the channel as well. Appreciate you all watching. Make sure you like the video if you enjoyed, and I will see you all again on the next one. Deuces.